Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are doing great. In another episode, I will walk you through some of the activities that can help you dramatically improve your English. When we talk about English conversation, it's a tricky topic. It's a tricky topic because we are not dealing with one type of conversation. We need to divide English conversation into the major components of it. The major components of English conversation are listening and speaking. In language, we have two channels of communication. We have the channel of production and we have the channel of comprehension. They are independent channels of each other and they do not necessarily use the same parameters and the same tools interchangeably. When we comprehend what people say, we are pretty much decoding the messages that are sent via sound waves that hit our ears and then through the nerves to our brain to decode the messages and attempt to understand what the person is saying. By the same token, when we talk about production of conversation, we process the decoded messages of the speakers and we send back a coded message to the listeners. And in this way of communication, we are exchanging coding and decoding messages between the speakers and the listeners. For these two channels of communication, and by these two channels of communication, I mean listening and speaking, we have different parameters and different strategies to help you improve them in order to be efficiently communicating messages in shorter period of time. Human being tends to say less to mean more. That's why in our conversation, we attempt to reduce the amount of effort for the words that we utter because we assume that the person understands what we are talking about or they are from the same context. So there is no absolute necessity to dramatically emphasize every single word. If we emphasize every single word, our speech is going to be chunky because all of the stress and intonation and elision and assimilation is going to be salient in our speech, and that is going to deter flow of comprehension, or they may consider you weird or strange or talking strangely. The only occasion where we can overstress some of these vocabulary is when we are teaching phonetics and phonology, when we need to stress the sounds and utter them clearly and enunciate them to students so they understand that. But in reality, that's not the case. People talk naturally. They truncate lots of words for sake of brevity and for sake of shortness. The point of this lesson is actually focusing on the first part, which is the listening to speakers. I overemphasized the activity of listening because it can dramatically improve your talents and skills and sharpens your mind to catch and fish for every single word that is uttered by native speakers who speak English and by non-native speakers. And in order to develop this, you need to practice critical listening. When we talk about critical listening, we do not necessarily have to go through the details that only specialists and experts go through in the bachelor and master and PhD programs. We just need to touch the tip of the iceberg and see what the commonalities are of listening and what we can do in order to strategize good protocol to improve our listenings. In order to improve our listening quite well, we need to focus on the word consistency. I have repeated this word hundreds of times in the previous lessons and previous episodes. And there is a reason for that. The high potential impact of consistency on listening is going to effectively improve your receptive and productive skills. If you respond well, you produce good quality English. And that's pretty much the same issue when it comes to speaking. But in order to improve your listening, you need to conduct a little bit of research online to find what is suitable to you. Not everything that you listen to online is accessible, and not everything that you listen to online can be beneficial to you. And the reason of that is because it is designed for different kind of contexts and different types of learners and different types of levels. So you need to selectively choose what you are interested to learn about and focus on that specifically. If you're interested to learn more about music, if you're interested to learn more about culture, if you're interested to learn and discover the history of the English language, these are very quite common contexts where you can explore online podcasts. I talked in one of the videos about a car phone holder. The reason I emphasize that kind of technology gadget is because it helps you pull out some of the podcasts and listen to through your commute to work and through your commute back home. And it helps you to some extent, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, maybe 20%. And that can effectively improve your listening over the course of time. It's a gradual process. It takes a little bit of patience. So it takes patience. You need to be patient when it comes to listening. Another important thing to mention to you is that when I mention the word listening, I do not necessarily mean exactly listening. Maybe watching is the alternative strategy here. When we watch, we're listening. When we watch movies, we're listening. We are practicing active listening. So we do not necessarily mean by listening only listening passively to recording that we do not see what is happening in accord with that. So you need to understand that listening is actually watching and watching is actually listening. There are two faces to the same coin here. This is the essential element of our lesson of today. First, what we learned is a few vocabulary about listening. Second, you actively listen to me, and that is great because you're now practicing listening. And third, I've equipped you with some strategies to go search online for listening and probably even motivated you to do so. I will link some of the best podcasts to listen to. I truly believe podcast is the best way to go when it comes to improve your listening. The reason of which is because listening to podcast is going to help you slow down the recording, listen effectively, and be able to understand, grasp the main idea, the context of the conversation, the kind of vocabulary that is used, and also the grammatical structures of the sentences and how people adopt them and how people use them effectively in their one-on-one communication. So that's the point of this lesson. The most important podcast that I can definitely think of on top of my head is ESL Pod or ESL Podcast. This is an important podcast and it's so popular around the world. Lots of people listen to it. And in Iraq, we have links to download, I think, 5 to 10 gigabytes of this podcast and to listen to as episodes, one episode per day. Every episode lasts for about 30 minutes. So that's a lot of podcast listening, and that can eventually help you understand and grasp English so much better. Have a wonderful evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in another episode. ربي يحفظكم مدرب لغة وليد خالد.